So, do you want me to, I can introduce?
So now we're gonna go back to item 3, work plan for workshop, and I'm gonna let Doug introduce David.
So this is our second. I don't think we intend to get everything done tonight, but this is our second workshop to get a work plan together for the soon-to-be called Traffic and Mobility Commission. So the first workshop I think was very productive, and David will go over. We can review that, but that's what's in your agenda. The staff report talks about our Tier 1 and our Tier 2 values. And so today, David Graham, the Chief Innovations Officer, is going to help facilitate the next step. And like I said, we're not going to push this, but we're hoping by next month, hopefully we get almost closure, and we intend to go to November 12th to City Council. That's where we're kind of lined up to go November 12th to City Council for their approval of the work plan. In advance of this, what I'd like is Steve Linke has submitted comments to this meeting. I think they'll probably be relevant to this meeting and the next meeting in terms of input. And before I hand it over, what I'd like you to do, if possible, is submit in writing to me your comments, your inputs, anything that's missed. I think, Steve, I don't want to speak for you, but the intent was probably everything that you've heard from the commission, and then some, maybe. But I think the intent is that it is inclusive of what you've all been speaking about, the letters I've written, the list. But if you don't feel that adequately represents that or something's missing, I'd like you to submit it by September 20th, so you got a couple weeks, to submit it to me in writing so that we can digest it, we can circulate it, everybody can get the information. So that'll be my task to you all, is to get input by the 20th. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to David.
All right, well, thank you all very much. I had a great time going through the values with all of you and the creation of them. Just a little bit of a roadmap, and I'll be using this, which is maybe a little awkward for the way the room is set up. But what we are hoping to accomplish today in our work plan number 2 session is we're going to review the values from the work plan session 1 that were created by all of you. And then we're going to use those in crafting a mission statement. So we know the duties of the Traffic and Mobility Commission, and even though the ordinance is not in effect yet, I am shifting to that. So you're now deemed the Traffic and Safety Commission. I don't care what the lawyers say, sorry. So that's what we'll be functionally working as through this particular session.
Of course, it's Traffic and Mobility.
Mobility, sorry, Traffic and Mobility Commission.
Just help the lawyer out there.
Exactly. And then we're going to hopefully get to identify goals and provide input for the development of your final work plan, which then will be drafted and then considered by this entire group. So, let's start with the duties that are in the ordinance, the new set of duties, which are similar to what you've done before, just in terms of framing what the role of this body is. And I'm not going to read through it, but if you look at A, B, and C, really what this says is you are here to make recommendations to the City Council and Planning Commission, I'm missing commission on there, on mobility and traffic safety matters, included but not limited to those related to pedestrian, bicycle, vehicular, and transit modes of travel, and park and school safety. And that line is used a couple of times. So as saying too that this is a public forum to be able to review that community input in those particular areas, and then review and provide recommendations for revision to city codes, plans on mobility and traffic safety matters. So does everybody feel pretty comfortable with what your role is here as an advisory body to the City Council, to other bodies? Should we discuss that a little bit more? Show of hands, how comfortable are we with what your job is?
Steve is all the way up there.
Okay.
Do we understand the advisory part? We've had so much discussion about that, so that.
Yeah, and we
that's
have
the key
many
word.
advisory boards, and really, I mean, I always see it as you are in many ways the city council's chosen representatives for the community. Obviously, they're going to come to city council meetings and to these meetings as well. But you get the chance to really spend time understanding this particular issue, and with your unique perspective as community members, provide input to the council and to the planning commission on those matters, as well as providing advisory support for staff. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the values that you previously identified, and we will review this and get a sense of if it's still what you feel makes sense from the perspective of this group. So, you said that you value enhancing safe mobility. You value government transparency. You value data-driven decision-making. You value doing the right thing, or doing things, making sure that things are done the right way. These were your top tier value statements that you provided. And I'm going to go into the sort of the second tier as well, which had a few less votes. And for those that were not at the meeting, this was all provided just direct input from all of you, and then we began to vote on or provide points on each of these to see what the pleasure of the commission was as it related to what you felt your values generally were. And we came out of that meeting, from my perspective, with a strong sense that these were things that all mattered to the commission. In that second tier, a commitment to the city of Carlsbad as an organization and to its residents. And then being forward-looking, being able to kind of look towards the future, to think and plan for what may be coming down the pike. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to really verify and validate that these are the things that you care about, that matter. So I'm going to start just with a brief discussion on enhancing safe mobility. I like to use, if you think of the term, the Traffic and Mobility Commission believes in enhancing safe mobility. Is that something that resonates with all of you? We'll kind of do this by consensus. If anybody has an issue or disagrees, then please speak up and we'll have a further discussion. But enhancing safe mobility, that's what we're about here as the Traffic and Mobility Commission? Okay, I like it. As opposed to unsafe mobility, that would be a really difficult thing to be working on. Okay, government transparency. Do we as a Traffic and Mobility Commission believe in government transparency?
Yes.
Okay, and that's something that matters to us.
Very much.
Seeing a lot of nodding heads. Okay, that's chalk one up for good government. We believe in transparency. All right, data-driven decision-making. The Traffic and Mobility Commission believes in data-driven decision-making. Seeing a lot of nodding heads. The alternative is just doing things flying by the seat of your pants and with gut. I think data-driven is probably the right approach to decision-making. Okay. The Traffic and Mobility Commission believes in doing the right thing, or making sure that things are done the right way. Does that resonate with us? Okay, very good. Now, we have 4 of those right there. That is quite a bit. And so we can kind of conclude there. But let's look at the other 2 that were the second tier. The Traffic and Mobility Commission is committed to the city of Carlsbad and its residents. Does that resonate with us? Okay. And then the Traffic and Mobility Commission is forward-looking. Does that sound like us? Okay. So we're going to take these values and we're going to begin to think about how we can craft that into a mission statement for us. Many of you have probably been through these sorts of exercises and it kind of feels like Mad Libs. You have some facilitator come in and you kind of fill in that generic word into some location. This is a hilarious cartoon. Basically, you can Mad Libs any mission statement, but you are all far more intelligent and far more committed to the city than that. So you're going to get to craft your own mission statement. I love this, the people on the right. Guided by a relentless focus on quality, and then add another cliche, quality. We've already used that. And we've all seen some of these cliches that fit in the mission statements. And that's why we want it to be uniquely what you all believe speaks to who you are. And we'll get into a few thoughts about how you can have a real solid mission statement. Okay, so how do you write a mission statement that doesn't suck?
Great video.
And I'm about to play part of it.
Are you?
Yes. So
Play it all the time.
I love folks that kind of this stuff resonates and a bit of a sarcastic approach to it. So we're going to go quickly through this little video, or part of it at least.
Well, what about Italian?
Come on, don't freeze on me, computer. There we go. Here we go. All right, here we go.
I want to show you why most mission statements are so terrible. So let's say that you own a chain of pizza parlors, and maybe you have a mission statement that you've drafted, and it says something like, our mission is to serve the tastiest damn pizza in Wayne County. Now that's pretty good, if you ask me. If I was one of your employees, I could get excited about that. But here's where things go off the rails. So you invite all your colleagues to come join you and to help you wordsmith this thing, and you all sit around a table, and right in front of your eyes, a transformation happens. All of these people who you like and respect suddenly become 10th grade English teachers and begin to nitpick every word of this thing.
Hey, I really like the word present better than serve. It has a nice resonance.
We obviously can't say damn. And why limit ourselves to Wake County?
And guys, I know our pizza is good, but what about the calzones and salads? Why don't we just say highest quality Italian food?
Our Greek salad isn't Italian.
We haven't even talked about the atmosphere yet, the big comfy booths and the kids' birthday parties and all that.
Yeah, great point. You know what we're really doing here? We are providing a family entertainment solution.
Yeah, solution.
Nailed it.
And everyone's excited now, you're almost there. And then Steve at the end of the table pipes up.
Listen, guys, we haven't mentioned anything about integrity. That's what it's all about. At the end of the day, integrity.
And is anyone at the table going to rise up and go to the mat against the word integrity being in the mission statement? Doubtful. So presto, that's in. And now here's your new and improved mission statement. Our mission is to present with integrity the highest quality entertainment solutions to families. I know this is a little bit silly, but you got to admit this is what 99% of mission statements sound like. And now you know why. There's this cycle of making words more ambiguous and more fancy until all of the meaning, leaches out. Here.
Until all of the meaning leaches out. Would you know that that is a pizza parlor by the way that that mission statement is crafted? You wouldn't even know that has anything to do with pizza at all. And so a couple of things as far as tips go for our mission statement development here. We want to try to use concrete language, so something that is clear and avoids the fluffy terms that find their way into many of our mission statements. We want to be clear about the what and the why. And this is the mission statement that will be guiding the entire work plan. So what and why is the Traffic and Mobility Commission doing what they do? Understand the short and long term. So it might be important to recognize, is our mission statement, does it take into account the length of time that we're going to be working on this so that the work plan will be in place? I like these four statements where we think about it conveying value. We like it to be aspirational and somewhat inspiring. It needs to be reasonable and specific as well. Just simple things like that. And then we want to try to be concise in the mission statement development. So let's get at it. We're thinking about this, and we can craft it however you all would like, but I like to think about it in terms of the Traffic and Mobility Commission, and I took some actions. So this is similar to your values, but in an active way, right? So the Traffic and Mobility Commission enhances safe mobility. The Traffic and Mobility Commission promotes government transparency. The Traffic and Mobility Commission uses data to make decisions. The Traffic and Mobility Commission does the right thing the right way. The Traffic and Mobility Commission is committed to the city and its residents. And the Traffic and Mobility Commission looks over the horizon and anticipates the future. So let's start a discussion around how these could be used to craft your mission statement, or what that might look like. What are our thoughts here?
Looks good.
I agree.
Well, I guess we
Write it
can,
down.
can we just start, do we have to start with the traffic and mobility?
You don't?
Because we can start as a commitment to the city of Carlsbad and the residents, the Traffic and Mobility Commission. Comes the next one.
Okay. Move the commitment first. Other thoughts?
Will promote mobility and traffic safety for all modes of transportation.
Promote mobility
And traffic safety for all modes of transportation.
and traffic safety and safety for all modes. Okay.
Through increased connectivity and intelligent transportation management, period.
That's a little
That's
bit
a little-
more than.
Connectivity and, sorry,
Intelligent, well, through increased connectivity and intelligent transportation management. That's the preamble to the mobility element, so I think Peter needs to
Yeah,
reinvent the wheel.
to me, I feel that one bullet is more than using simple language.
What I see is why are we here, which is to advise the city council and provide public input.
Can I ask a question about voice here?
yep,
So, that's a statement as if we're doing it, right? That's sort of, that's probably some grammatical way to describe these. Is a mission statement active, or is it aspirational? That we, how,
the answer is yes. It needs to speak to the way that you want. It could be aspirational, say, the vision of the Traffic and Mobility Commission are these things, or to do these things. It also can be active in what you actually are doing. So it could be as a commitment to the city and its residents, the Traffic and Mobility Commission it provides advice to the city council in a public forum to enhance safe mobility, promote government transparency. We use data to make decisions and believe that doing the right thing the right way is what is best for our residents, or for the future of the city, right? I like the active terms as opposed to
Yes.
another voice, but it really is up to you all.
I like the vision to be that aspirational, and then the mission comes down to how are we doing that vision.
right, but, so that's fine, and I'm not arguing against it, but when we say, will we enhance safe mobility?
And I
That
think-
begs for some explanation of how we do that or what we do.
Sure.
And maybe it does not, I mean, maybe it is self-evident for that.
I think it's our mission to promote safe mobility.
Promote.
We promote safe mobility.
It's our mission to promote
Yeah,
safe
right.
and traffic safety.
I like that first, so I like
Well, we
all
can't
the way to the second. And
do
the-
anything because we're at
Second.
advisory, so all we can do is ensure that we're making sure that everybody else looks at it. Because we're only advisory. All we
Yeah, so.
do is Promote safety.
I think we have to maybe even as part of the first or second sentence talk about that specifically, so we don't have to mention it again. Namely, as advisory
I like what David did before, where he started out with the advised city council, and from there, you can go
Yeah.
down to promote mobility and
But-
safety.
But I don't see how we're promoting mobility. We're not a promotional organization.
What's the better word?
Yeah.
So, and that's an interesting question that comes up with advisory boards, because I think there can be a two-way role of an advisory board. One, we usually think of the advisory board providing that advice to the city council or to some other body of the city. But are you also, in your role of the public forum and as community members, are you engaged and involved with other members of Carlsbad in promoting safety or safe mobility? Are you both advisory members and also ambassadors? I don't know. That is kind of a question to all of you. Some, take planning groups for example, they kind of see themselves in that role of that two-way, right? They are both providing advice up, but they're also active with the community. I think that's an interesting question for all of you to discuss. Do you see that as part of your role?
The answer is.
I see that we enhance, because part of the work plan is going to be, as an example, looking at high traffic collision intersections to come up with ways of why and how can the city improve whatever it is about it to improve the safety. So we are enhancing everything every decision that we make, we take into account, is this safety, is this safe or is it not safe? So that's why I feel we do enhance.
Yeah.
That's our name, right? It's traffic safety and mobility safety, or we've been so far, that's one of the major things, on top of the mobility.
We get a lot of our items that we carry forward, make recommendations on, based on the public coming to us and discussing things that are an issue to them, that we wouldn't otherwise know about.
Which most of the time is safety related.
Exactly.
So I do like the work in
You didn't like promote it. Advocate for it.
We can put,
Or are you saying just use enhance and forget about the advising part?
No, definitely.
well, no, we are
We started the advising
advising,
part,
but
yeah. Advice kicks off everything.
enhance to me is like you're improving, we're improving the safety, mobility safety in the city.
So advise to enhance mobility.
Or
and
to
traffic
ensure
safety.
mobility and safety.
Yeah.
Work just sounds like a lobbying group to me. That's not who we are.
Promoting that.
That's what it sounds like,
Yeah.
yeah. It sounds like we're an advocacy crew coming in to go focus on something and go do it. That's just where it hit me. It doesn't mean that that's not what we're doing.
So funny enough, in the ordinance, it says promote.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So yeah, you provide recommendations regarding measures that should be taken to promote mobility and traffic safety.
But that has an important qualifier before that, which I think makes it work right. So I think that's actually not a bad.
I'm actually, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's actually a pretty good.
No, I anti-promote, it just hit me the wrong way.
Right.
But that came out fine.
Another thing I think in this
Yeah, but we don't
presentation was
we
the,
don't have it in
our
the
duties
summary, we
to, I think
have
was
someone here.
review studies and reports of the staff. So it's more of like we're here to seek and understand, like within the city, so.
Okay. So,
Okay.
as you're thinking about these, and sometimes prioritization is helpful in how we're going to craft the statement, which it sounds from what I'm hearing from all of you that enhancing or promoting safe mobility is your top priority. Is that correct? Am I hearing that correct from the discussion?
I think so.
Okay, so we really want to get that up somewhere near the, what would we say is our second, and I would also say that, like, is sort of everything, right? The other elements are kind of beneath that, but that is incredibly broad in a good way that really defines who and what you are. What is next, if there is a next, of these?
So one of the things about promoting government transparency, I think needs to be connected to something, right? I mean, 'cause we don't do that. I mean, we're not here to advocate for transparency, but we need to be transparent, right? Because I think that's all that we can do, right? Yeah.
And make our scope of what we're looking at, which is
Right.
traffic and mobility, transparent.
Yeah, so our mission, part of our mission is to act in a transparent, open manner.
And facilitate the rest of the traffic mobility portion of the city
Exactly.
to act in a transparent manner also. Not just us, but.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely.
Okay.
So would that be like being transparent by using data, up-to-date data to make transparent decisions or something like that?
Yeah, a lot of what Steve's been
Yeah.
pushing here lately is get out what's going on and be able to make decisions based on that.
Yeah. Because I think it's important that we're just not throwing darts on the wall and saying, that's our decision.
Mhm.
That we use, it's data-driven decisions.
So how do we like let's get to the public, what you're discussing is this role of you as the volunteers. As an advisory board of community members, do you provide a public forum or do you provide a conduit for public input? We provide a place for public input. We provide the public input or significant public input. What do you like in your role of this way that you receive input and you provide that to staff, to council, to the planning commission?
We've been using public forum as language.
I think you can go up you can chunk up one level to conduit, which is the public forum, or it doesn't even have to be a public forum, it could be,
It provides a public forum.
no, I mean, it's more than a public forum.
Oh,
I mean, if somebody sends something to you or me or whatever, privately, we have a conduit to push it up the chain. If somebody sends something to Doug, he can bring it to the TSC here for there. So it doesn't have to be somebody standing up at the meeting, public forum. We're more than that. We provide an avenue, conduit, whatever that is for those issues.
Receive public input. That's more general maybe.
yeah.
Do you receive, is that the word?
Receive public input, so it can be in written form or.
If I could, but I'm hearing that's one way.
Yeah.
Receiving input, but you're saying the conduit is both ways. You also can transfer information out, right?
We can transfer information out within the Brown Act regulations and things. So,
Gotta have that.
yeah, put that in our,
I think he was saying in addition to, you're saying in addition to public speakers at our meetings, the public can also speak directly to you, right?
right. But to Doug's point, on the conduit side, we also give information back to the public on issues and those types of things. Whether it's police report, whether it's us doing comments or bringing stuff to be put on the agenda, is our way of helping transmit back to the public things that are going on and being more transparent and educational.
Yeah, well, communicate with the public. That's two ways. Doesn't say what form of communication. Communicate with the public.
Okay. So as we're getting the sense of that public role and then tying it to enhancing safe mobility, we wouldn't want to start with as a, but speaking to who you are, let's just say we are. TSC is an advisory body of community members that provides either an avenue, a conduit for public input in enhancing safe mobility in the city. Is that a long, I'm not, you can wordsmith the rest of it. Is that sentence number one of what you are and are doing, or what are some variations on that?
Basically.
What I'm hearing is, I like the communication and the public input. That seems beyond just being a forum, right? Forum kind of seems passive. I think you all seem to be much more active than just this being in place. And it seems like you're out in the community as well.
I think that should be the second sentence. Because that's one of the methods by which we enhance mobility and traffic safety is through communications with the public. But
So is
I think
that,
the top line is that we promote, or that we enhance.
so is that part of the mission, like you were saying, to be the first sentence of the mission statement?
It could be, yeah. That's kind of what we're trying to
Yeah,
get.
no, I like this idea first.
As much as I agree with you on communicating with the public, I think it steps on the toes of Brown Act, so God forbid that. But I do like, I wish we could, but it kind of scares me. We've been advised so much about.
That's scary.
The Brown Act is, puts a light on, well, I don't want to speak on that, but it's different. It doesn't stop communication, it just means that you have to do it according
so
to.
I think the concern would be if you're out in the community, conveying that you speak for the entire commission when you're out there. If you're there as a solo commissioner or member of the public, you certainly should be out in the community, participating, hearing input, and bring that back as part of your commissioner comment to the entire commission. I think my main concern would be if, and I haven't seen that play out here, but sometimes we'll have an individual on advisory board that purports to be acting for the entire body when they act in the community. It's not a Brown Act issue as much as if they're acting in lieu of the
Well,
entire
yeah, the
commission.
role, yeah,
right?
the ambassador, when you start saying ambassador, you can't speak
Right.
for the city, but when you were saying the Brown Act, I don't think the Brown Act is there to stop any communication, it just means you can't add something on the agenda that day, you have to do it per a process, but you can still
So when you're out
communicate.
in the public and somebody comes up and says, oh, you need to think about blah, blah, blah. Well, all you can say is I can take it to you. Right?
Mhm. You can't, the Brown Act says you just can't talk to anybody else on the board, you have to bring it to the board.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not to say you can't talk about it, you can't talk about it as a group.
And you can't represent to say,
The
the commission says,
Yeah.
well, the commission, even worse, the commission feels that too, so we're gonna go take care of that for you.
So, based on this discussion, a couple of thoughts. And I am using the TSC just because it's easy for now. The TSC is committed to enhancing safe mobility citywide. We're an advisory body of community members that provides a valuable resource for public input on transparent, data-driven mobility for all. What things do we want to, and I can actually put that up.
Do you want help doing this, are you doing okay? You want me to,
Yeah, I can-
like, be scribe, or you want me to type it up?
Do we like a very declarative sentence to open up that's just you and safe mobility? Is that?
I do.
What do you all think? And this is going to be, just like we did with values, if I haven't said that yet, this is going to be something that then we will circulate back around with you and we can get into some of the wordsmithing stuff.
The last part, after
We shut the whole lot of words in there.
resource for public input and transparent data-driven mobility for all. That doesn't sound right to me.
Yeah,
That's fine. I'm trying to get all your values in there. And again, we don't have to keep all of those in there for your mission statement because it will be a part of the work plan, right?
Let's see it, and then it will be easier to parse out what we.
You're gonna table there, David, if you want.
It's easier. Honest, I do. Get the work done. Yeah.
What do we like? What do we not like?
I'm not crazy about the word resource.
Okay.
A valuable resource.
Those are some of the words that you guys have used.
And it doesn't really matter to me too much, but I prefer enhancing mobility and traffic safety, or the other way around, just because safe mobility sounds like we're only the safety commission still, but there are issues like transportation demand management, which is not really about safety, it's about promoting mobility separately, so mobility and traffic safety. But I don't care.
For the city and people cause
I like the second.
Mobility and safety?
Yes.
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 Consensus on that?
I don't want, if we want to say traffic safety, because we're not into other kind of safety.
Right, and that's the question of, is it just traffic safety? Or are we actually talking about, and this was our discussion on safe mobility with the values, right? Is it also for pedestrians? Is it for bikes? Is
Well,
it-
pedestrian traffic and bicycle traffic and vehicle traffic, but I guess traffic is only vehicle, then if that's what people feel like.
We've never really talked about traffic and, for example, the environment or things like that. So I'm not sure what additional things we're thinking about, but one thing is committed to enhancing safe and effective or efficient or
Safe and efficient transportation.
safe,
Transportation is more general than I would cover pedestrian and vehicle.
Yeah, I like transportation, because there are many modes of transportation, right? Even walking is a transportation.
So transportation safety, mobility and transportation safety.
Yeah, I like that. So
I'm
it's
looking at
mobility and
traffic, it
transportation.
isn't really specific to autos, so it's traffic is movement of
Yeah.
goods and people, so.
Yeah, I think people immediately, because this statement is, this is for you guys, and this is what the public will think about you. I think the immediate thing most people think when they think traffic are vehicle traffic,
Yes.
not the others. Whereas transportation, I think, now has a more broad term, but it is completely your call.
Votes for transportation.
Sounds good to me. Yeah. Transportation safety.
Yeah. So enhancing mobility and transportation safety is citywide. Okay, we got one sentence done.
That's big. We're clipping through it.
That's good, yeah.
And here's a question to you. Do you want the qualifier citywide? It's somewhat implicit. I put it in there. Could it actually also have to do with the intersection with other jurisdictions, right? Are you making decisions that relate to how beyond our borders we're interacting? Or do you guys like, the benefit of citywide is it does give that really nice, we are the whole city and care about the whole city. I I'll just put that to you.
I would almost rather have safety in Carlsbad. Well, just a thought.
Yep, just plugging it in there to see what you guys think. So, we'll use my old radio voice. The Traffic and Mobility Commission is committed to enhancing mobility and transportation safety, period, or enhancing mobility and transportation safety citywide, or enhancing mobility and transportation safety in Carlsbad.
I think citywide.
Let's go with, we're gonna vote one, you get to vote on one of each of those. So, the first is no qualifier, so enhancing mobility and transportation safety, period. All right? Number 2 is going to be citywide. Enhancing mobility and transportation safety citywide. Okay? Mobility and transportation safety in Carlsbad.
And here's a third.
Okay?
Just to confuse everybody, you could wipe out Carlsbad citywide and put in the very top, the Carlsbad Traffic Commission.
The Carlsbad Traffic and the
Mobility
City of Carlsbad Traffic and Mobility Commission is committed to enhancing mobility and transportation safety, period. It's a fourth option. Any takers on that one?
I would say that adds a lot of words that if I were editing, I would say I would take that and put it back just in Carlsbad, for example.
Okay. We don't have to make a decision on this right now if there's not a decent consensus on this one. I can run options with what you all discussed and take a look at it. It's a pretty minor point.
This actually is pretty minor. I mean, we should be able to, frankly, I think any version would be fine. I think it's a really pretty good sentence.
I think for the average resident, when you say citywide, they're thinking of Carlsbad, and they're not thinking, oh, is this intersection that I'm driving, is this like borderline, is it Oceanside, is it Carlsbad, should I worry about? I mean, citywide, they know that if their address is Carlsbad,
Okay.
and they drive around, to me, that's my 2 cents on
That's
why
fine.
I think citywide.
And it is Carlsbad Commission, so I think
Yep.
it's implicit, that's why I voted for, let's just keep it short.
All right.
Because it will be safety citywide, so you're getting rid of a couple of those.
Does this feel
Yeah, this is
good?
how it is.
The Traffic and Mobility Commission is committed to enhancing mobility and transportation safety citywide.
I don't think you need a citywide, but.
I like it. But
Okay.
again, it's to the average resident that's thinking of, not somebody that's coming to our meetings all the time, not somebody that suddenly has some kind of mobility issues or wants to go somewhere to express their concern about something on their street or sidewalk or something. We have to think of everybody.
All right, so there's 7 of you, so we should be able to break this deadlock if, if there are, everyone has to vote this time, all right? So you either get period or citywide. Who votes for period? Enhancing mobility and transportation safety, period. 1, 2, 3. Who has transportation and safety citywide? 1, 2, 3, 4. But is everybody comfortable? I mean, it sounds like you all were getting to some, it's not a, a federal case if it's one or the other.
Perfect.
Okay.
No, that's
Could have gone either way, so.
All right. So, no, actually, we like this sentence. So don't look at the other part for a second.
Excuse me.
What is that? Put this back up. Approach this a little differently. What is that missing? I mean, that is a pretty good mission statement for this organization, for this group.
I move that we make that our mission statement.
And here's, so, I think that makes a lot of sense. Remember, this is your work plan, so you can have other descriptions that touch on the values that you have, that talk about how those values are being played out in your work plan. You don't have to assume that this is the only thing people are gonna read about who you are and what your mission is. How does this feel to you? How does this sound? The Traffic and Mobility Commission is committed to enhancing mobility and transportation safety citywide. Is that why you all give up your afternoons or evenings like this?
Perfect.
Is it missing anything?
Are we sure we just want to narrow it to just safety?
No, we're not. It's
Mobility
mobility and transportation safety.
Is it mobility, safety, and transportation safety? What am I reading it wrong?
No, mobility and transportation.
Mobility and
Okay.
transportation safety. That's a good question. It
So
is,
mobility can be a mobility safety.
well, as part
Maybe it's
of,
my ESL thing, I
I
just
think
want to
mobility
make
is
sure.
more the efficiency of the travel, and transportation safety is the safeness of the travel. So our old duties were transportation safety mostly,
Right,
and now we're adding in mobility.
right, so there are two elements. So if somebody read it, they will read it as two elements.
If the average member of the public understands the word mobility, it's kind of a jargon word, but I think it's
Okay.
perfect the way it is.
Okay. Then I'm good.
It also points back to our reference of mobility element.
Right.
You liking it?
I think we should change the name.
No, I think it's
Change
important
the
to the
order.
point. It's concise, it's said to be concise, right?
It's very concise. I think it's great. I think that you have a good set of values that can be played out through other elements of this. This is concrete. It tells people what you do. And I think it doesn't need much explanation. Okay, with that in mind, we're going to move into goals. And I'm putting this up here so that you have it.
We're having an entertainment experience.
And we provide pizza. Okay, great. This is great. So, we have our mission statement down. We know what we do and who we are. So, now that you got your mission down, it took me a lot to find that picture, people. You should really appreciate that. Man on the moon with a bike. Okay, now that we have our mission down, let's move into the goals and goal setting. So, love this cartoon. Wally, what are your goals for the coming year? My goal is to replace my soul with coffee and become immortal. I mean something about work. Oh, I thought you said my goals. Okay, so goals can be very broad. People means different things to different people. You probably, in doing some things like this before, may be familiar with some of the approaches to how you set good goals. And so we're going to go through that right now, and then we'll actually move into setting goals. So, what is a goal? It's broad and qualitative statements about the organization, what the organization hopes to achieve, in this case, what the commission hopes to achieve. This is terminology that comes from the GFOA. An objective is more quantitative. Everybody knows the difference between qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative statements that describe how progress in achieving a goal will be measured. So the objectives really are the things that are the milestones or the ways that you get to the end of the road. Simply put, the difference between goals and objectives is that the goal oftentimes is the destination, what we want to try to achieve, and an objective is a measure of the progress needed to get to that destination. So we know that we are going to ultimately enhance safety and transportation safety and mobility citywide because we support this program because we do that thing. Everybody's good on that? Many of you probably have gone through SMART. There's lots of different ways to think about goals, but this one, it just makes a ton of sense, right? Is your objective specific, or in this case, goal? Can you measure progress? That's the objectives part of this. Is the goal realistically attainable? Nothing worse than your New Year's resolution goals that by March are usually your gym membership starts to lapse and you're not running as much. How relevant is the goal? Why does this matter to you and to the people that you are advising? And then what is the time frame? Now, one of the things that has been added to the SMART goals is something I think will be great through the work plan process, which are the smarter goals, the evaluation and reevaluation of those. And you'll be doing annual work plans. My expectation is you can set multi-year goals that perhaps you're not having to go through a whole series of sessions every single year because you have multi-year goals that continue beyond just that 1 year, but you're evaluating and reevaluating that. So, as we set goals, we want it to be specific. If we're going to have objectives under it, we want to be able to measure progress. Let's be realistic and make sure they're attainable, make sure they're relevant to the mission that you just created, and then time frame can be helpful as well. Okay, so let's start talking about goals. I'm going to leave it on here, and we're going to begin to write them down. This is your mission in my mass murderer handwriting. Hopefully you can read it. Here is where we're going to start to throw around goal type ideas. Things that you want to be in the work plan that your role as an advisory body will continue to work on, advise on, support. And remember, you have a series of values that you've also discussed that may find their way into the goal and goal development. So, what we'll do out of this is we will take these goals, we perhaps will get to some objectives. As you're thinking about the goal, we can also add objectives in there as well. And let's just kind of fire off on some ideas. Use your past history and what you've done to date, maybe to help to consider what some goals may be. And then we'll work on refining those. Some of the things that you talked about in your values, you talked about data-driven decision making. You talked about transparency. You've talked about your role as a forum, an advisory body, but also communicating in with the public. What are some things that you would like to achieve this fiscal year or beyond?
Review the E&M manual.
Review the E&M manual?
Yes. With the goal of having city council adopt it formally.
And I actually don't know that abbreviation, sorry.
Evaluation and monitoring manual.
Evaluation and monitoring. Okay, what else?
Before we do that, does that thing exist yet?
Well, let me maybe make a recommendation that go a little higher.
Well, we'll get to all that in just,
Because
yeah, in a minute.
the title, though, just say, what do you want to review? The way things are evaluated.
Evaluate and
you know.
monitoring?
Yeah.
Our program associated with that?
Documents related to the evaluation and monitoring of traffic. And then we don't have to get into a specific term. Is that?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
Review the
evaluation and monitoring of traffic.
procedures used to.
Policies and procedures.
Policies and procedures used to evaluate and monitor traffic in the city.
Traffic or transportation?
I'm going to do this.
Transportation.
Transportation,
Is it
mobility.
Multimodal, yeah, can we use that? Doesn't have to be in the
Yeah.
vision statement.
Is
once we
evaluating
get
the
down to goals,
high
I think we can
accidents,
start
collision
measuring all by goal.
intersections and
Yeah, it includes all.
Yeah.
is that
Yep.
too specific?
So we're,
I
and
think
remember, we
safety's
can get
different.
objectives in there too that can be a little bit more specific. Let me get this down. Review the policies and procedures.
Used to evaluate and monitor our multimodal system. Fair enough?
Yeah.
And I think that goes to safety, I think that gets there.
Yep.
You evaluate it in terms of safety, in terms of efficiency, in terms of connectivity. You have it at a high level, and then you can go down to specific objectives.
Okay.
Right, but this is for policies and procedures. I'm talking about the existing roads and intersections.
So the procedure would be to do an annual safety report, to evaluate the,
What are you trying to get at with the? What are you
I want
interested
to
in?
evaluate the high accidents, collision intersections or roadways,
Okay. So,
but I don't know how specific, that's too specific.
Would you want to
we
make?
get it all down and then we'll work on crafting it. Evaluate,
City projects within the transportation.
Accident
are you
rates,
thinking existing?
accident rates.
Existing.
Yeah.
Evaluate existing.
We don't
Or
really-
we just want to call them dangerous intersections or?
That's the, yeah,
Is that-
that's the easiest, I
Accident
guess.
rates.
yeah, collisions, evaluate collisions.
And that gets to your data driven, right?
Yeah.
Existing and dangerous.
Using the most updated data.
I don't know if dangerous is, we'll work on the
Yeah.
word.
Maybe-
Just as a
Yeah,
general
you can call
rule,
it
keep
something
going,
like
keep
that,
going.
or-
No, that's why it's a high
Collision
accident
Gives
prone.
me
collision.
pause, yeah.
Yeah.
Identify
Yeah.
places where we can,
Right, right. This
Evaluate
is a very
existing
broad
dangerous
track.
intersections using accident data. We'll,
Like the word crash instead of accident,
oh yeah, there's the crash versus accident thing.
Or collision,
crash.
correct?
What's the difference between crash and accident?
accident is
Crash is
something that's
usually not accidents.
not someone's fault.
Traffic incident data.
Are there instances
Well, it
where
can
people are
happen.
purposely,
But crashes usually happen because of a problem.
instead of by accident, they're doing it on purpose?
Yeah.
Essentially, they
Yeah.
drive drunk.
Well, yeah.
So we can get into wordsmithing what the right
Right.
Drunk driving
corporate
isn't an
term
accident.
is there,
That's
for
true.
dangerous and for accident.
Can we go into schools?
Well, that's what I was thinking, like, Commissioner Linky had a good point out on, like, examples of city projects. So city projects, the SRTS, is it, or the Safe Schools.
Safe
Safe
routes
routes to
for all,
schools.
safe routes to
Yeah.
schools, yeah.
So, you know, the projects that are going on, and then we can get specific into it on the SR, yeah, and then all those other ones that we've done.
So you want to say review safe school routes? Is that what you're saying?
Or whatever.
But that's
projects
something that Greg is working on right now, right?
The Safe Routes to Schools program,
Mhm.
were you interested in evaluating the Safe Routes to?
Yes.
I mean, that could even be a different,
But then there's also, what's the other one, the ride share, you know, all of those, I'm sorry.
Safety around schools.
Yeah,
So it would be mobility and transportation safety around schools.
I think you're gonna see that the sustainable mobility plan is kind of set up with that. Safe routes to school, safe routes to transit, at least that's what the intent was, safe routes to the coast. So you have this safety document. But I think, if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think the difference between the first and the second bullet, that second bullet is about looking at data, right?
Right, so this, I mean,
And then the third is starting to look at specific projects and
Right.
programs.
right, so they're all separate. But I think the more we talk about things, the more we give everybody maybe ideas for other ones. So it's just, like I said, it's a rough draft of just brainstorming, right? Right now.
Well, I have very specific
Yeah.
ideas, but it's only my ideas.
But any other ones?
The school safety was a big public input this year. So I think that deserves to be up there. And it was, I really don't remember in the years past that we've had too much discussion about safe routes to school. So I would like to see that addressed.
Can I ask, actually, what does it mean to review the policy procedures used to evaluate and monitor? So does that mean, in essence, having a staff report on it, and then we do something regarding that, or what exactly? So I'm trying to get an idea, how many of these can we have, for example?
My view of it would be, these documents largely are completed, or at least in draft form. We read through them, identify any concerns we might have, and then have a discussion with staff about those concerns. And I really feel like those things should be formally adopted by the city council rather than just documents that exist and are continually changing. So we would we would read the documents and provide feedback.
So, just from a practical standpoint, that would be getting access to the documents, reading and preparing, and having a discussion in a particular meeting, one meeting. And so in a meeting, how many items can we take on aside from the normal work that gets generated in time?
To me,
like so what I'm getting at is, do we have 12 slots that we can do these kinds of things, or
to me, under ideal circumstances, you would set a meeting where we would discuss a certain document. The document would be circulated to us.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We could then write written, like, because the meeting time is precious.
Right.
We could list our concerns in writing, submit them to the liaison. Hopefully then staff will have responses at the meeting, and then we can have a discussion at the meeting. Because if we get to the meeting and only start asking questions, then staff will say, well, I don't have an answer to that. But if we can submit our written comments before the meeting, and staff could even present and the staff report then could address them. I don't know, that's sort of my view of what I'd like to do.
okay, and so those reports generally exist now, and it would, getting those reports to us would be minimal staff time for them.
Right.
And then we would have a month or whatever, let's say, to rejoin, and within that month, they would have
A chance to respond.
a chance to respond. Okay, then it would come up and then we consider it. Okay, so that's, so then on that kind of, if those are a typical kind of goals, we would have 8 or 9 of those, or something like that.
If I could help on that, is that, this is just a list, and we're gonna have to go, at some point, figure out what our resources are. So it's okay just to keep adding to it. And I think what you're trying to do is bring transparency to the process. So it's more about looking at it and letting people look at it and comment to it, as opposed to rewriting it or doing our work for us. I think we have documents that we have to develop, and you're just saying, a public review of those important documents that we're already going to be generating.
Right, and many of them are already done.
Yep.
They're just a matter of, and the ones that aren't done, I would say those would just be pushed off. I'm not proposing that we say, staff, you need to finish this document by this date. It says when this document is complete, or a draft is complete, provide it to the traffic mobility, and, well, whatever her name is. And then we'll do this like a 1-month review, and then hopefully the city council can adopt it. Now that's up to the city council to decide whether they want to adopt it. It's just my personal feeling that these documents are so important that the city council should officially adopt them. And maybe they don't want to.
So to that, I'm hearing really 3 areas, 3 buckets, if you will, right now from what you've discussed. School safety, what's happening with mobility and school safety, evaluation and monitoring of the multimodal transportation system, and then very broadly, to the last discussion we're just having, advisory input on mobility and transportation safety policies, protocols, and procedures, some of which are the purview of advisory boards, others of which are kind of a very technical nature, which you can provide input on, but when we think about mobility and transportation and how both state regulations and federal regulations oftentimes drive what we can and can't do here, that's just something to consider. I thought one thing that you were mentioning, all of our other work, like the regular work, do you want a goal that encapsulates some of that too? This doesn't just have to be new stuff or new things, it's up to you. But are there things, because your work plan is also communicating to the public, that's a part of your regular business, that you want to make a goal, which is great because you can also show progress on those? Does that question make sense?
Yes, but on another side, what we do on a regular basis is review changes to the multimodal transportation system. So, hey, we need stop signs here, we want to change speed limits there. You know, that's part of our regular deal, and that needs to be part of our objectives also, or at least part of our task planning. In addition to the public side, the public input side, and it's really, it's not advisory input to engineering, we're advisory to the city council. We're reviewing first, we're reviewing what staff brings forward and making and giving our advice to the city council on there, which is.
Could I, and I don't want to keep going with the discussion, but I think sometimes the input type of thing, I think sometimes your role is it's not limited, but your role is to make sure that we've done things according to best practices.
Yes.
Yes.
So I think review, I'm just trying to help you with verbs. I'm not trying to, but I think sometimes it's just to review that decisions, the city council makes decisions based on best practices or something to that. And then I think that's a lot of what you do when stop signs, when those come in. You don't give input on where a stop sign should be. You're there to review.
That's what I'm saying. We review what staff is doing, and then we advise city council based on that.
Yeah.
And that's the heart and soul of where we
Should be.
have to do today. You know, the other stuff is wonderful, and we ought to be doing it too. That's the forward-looking part, but we have to capture the day-to-day stuff too.
Well, the day-to-day stuff for most of us, most of what we've been doing is associated with the traffic calming program.
Yeah.
And maybe we want to have that in
A
there.
lot of traffic calming, yeah, you know, there's speed bumps and stop signs and speed limits and,
Sure.
One thing I'd like to ask input from everybody else.
you don't need to put the traffic on.
I'm just getting these things down.
Our role is
It's
to
in-
advise
it's
the
in one
city
above it.
council,
Yep.
but how do we do that? We have the only way right now is if they read the minutes. We have no correspondence.
What we do is not the minutes, it's the specific motions that we put forward that goes through based on whatever that project is.
But there is nothing on a project. I've been to city council before, and it never says, this has been reviewed, and input from this commission says yes, or
Is it formally given?
So let's touch on that actually, because I want to find out if that, what I'm hearing is that when an item goes to city council, it doesn't reflect what the traffic and mobility commission, what this commission's vote was on that or the input. Is that accurate?
No.
Okay.
because I've seen instances.
So what happens, so we are still kind of, we feel like we're behind the wall. We're doing here and we have no idea what happens on the other side.
Right.
So what happens after we vote on something, yay, nay, whatever? What happens when it goes to the city council?
Let's say it's about painting or painting that desk, what color, right? And we come to you and we say we really think that it has to be the exact colors that are approved by city council to be the blue. And then you, as an advisory board, say, well, you know what, we're kind of sick and tired of that color. We need orange. We need some spice. Now, our staff's recommendation should reflect your input. It doesn't have to be based on it.
Right.
We can still say, you know, according to our current policy, we have to go blue, but, you know, to be transparent, we would have to say that the Traffic Safety Commission voted this way.
Right, but
But our
what
staff
happens
support-
right now? So if we vote on a stop sign, and that goes to the city council, walk us through what happens when it's given to the city council, when it's,
We still, it goes to a staff report, and staff has to make a recommendation. We don't have, we're not obligated to follow your recommendation. We do a staff report, it goes to city council, and if we're transparent, we will put down what the exact vote was from the Traffic
so do
Safety
you
Commission.
mention the, so it doesn't always happen?
Well, I shouldn't say that, we should, and that's what this work plan is about.
So in the staff report, this is the staff report, and then somewhere tiny in the bottom it says.
No,
So
I
I'm
think
just,
that
I'm
points-
just joking, but
Yeah,
I'm just
that
curious.
points to something that we should have as a goal, is to
Yeah.
ensure that our votes, so to
Our
speak,
advice, our
are,
advice.
Right, no,
advice
advice gets
is
to
going
the city
forward.
council.
yes, it's reflected in staff reports.
Right,
In the,
because I was looking at this City of Encinitas Traffic Commission, and they, in their terminology, is they provide written inputs to the city council.
And
And
your new ordinance says that too.
Okay. So somewhere, I think, when the, I'm not trying to say we should go up there and present to the city. I think that when you get traffic, a staff report, somewhere it says that it was reviewed by Traffic Mobility Commission, and they said yes, or we discussed
So I mean, if we
it.
are advisory to the city
Yeah.
council, and the city council does not know our advice,
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense.
Well,
So
yeah,
what I'm-
there's-
what
let me ask.
Hold on just one second. What I'm hearing here is a really great area for a goal that has a good feedback loop, because
Yes.
I'm ask John in just a second to kind of weigh in on how it's reflected. But right now, whether it is true or not, or policy or practice, this body doesn't feel like it's having a good
Right.
feedback between what you do here, what the city council action is, and then what comes back and is reported here.
Right.
Is that accurate
Yes.
from this body? Okay.
And at the city council meeting where they adopted our municipal code update, and I wrote this in my letter, the city council voted to say that we, as part of our work plan, need to include a task that says a member of our commission should go to them and talk to them. And so I proposed that if we disagree with staff, then we should nominate the chair or any of us to show up at the commission meeting where referral is, and they're welcoming that. But if we have a differing viewpoint from staff, then you or any of us that we designate can go to the city council or planning commission meeting and state this, what the city,
Yeah.
what our commission is saying about it. And then they also wanted a periodic update regardless of that, so every 6 months or every 3 months, you would go and give them an update on.
And there again, it meets our goals of being transparent.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, I think if
Because
I
right
could,
now,
the,
the city council is operating blind as to what we do.
yeah, there's
John,
two.
you had
But
some.
just to clarify one specific question, hi, I'm John Kim, I'm the acting city traffic engineer. Any staff report for ordinance change or traffic calming project that we present to council after we've taken it to Traffic Safety Commission does report the Traffic Safety Commission's recommendations and the vote connected to it. So if we have a stop sign and Traffic Safety Commission recommends approval, in the staff report to council, we say, at the meeting of such and such date, Traffic Safety Commission heard the staff report, voted, 5-0 or 7-0 in support of, and then staff's recommendation after that. So typically for all items brought
That's
from
what I
Traffic
was
Safety Commission to City Council,
So-
the results of the Traffic Safety Commission is reported to council.
Okay.
But that's only topics where we
We agree
vote,
on.
and a lot, well, where we vote. But if many of the topics we get are information only, and just as an example, the micromobility ordinance, they brought that to us, but they said, okay, well, we're not done writing the ordinance yet, so we're not gonna have you take a vote on it. But we had like a 30-minute discussion where we had all kinds of input on what we thought of this ordinance, But then when they brought it to the city council 2 weeks later, they had finished the ordinance, but none of our discussion was reflected in the staff report. It was just what staff thought and not what, so the question is, why would we spend 30 minutes talking about the topic and then have it not reflected in the staff report that goes to the city council? So we need to ensure that somehow they get that information, and at least some of the city councilors want that information, so.
So this is a great area for a deeper dive discussion and getting out there what the existing policies are, what would be appropriate for this body to do, and how that feedback loop is closed after an action is taken. So the council report back to the board or commission. So we can dig into that more if that ends up being a goal. It sounds like it is a good area for goal. Is that right?
No.
So review the current communication of this commission to the city council, subsequent action by city council, and report back to the commission. The grammar's not exactly right, but that's, you want to get down how this thing works so it's really clear, right? And what is legally permissible on, things that are information only that you don't take a vote on, how is that reflected? Are there some of those things that should be voting items? That's all something that could be discussed as a goal. And I'm pointing to Amanda because that's where we get in trouble.
Or if we take a vote and we vote in favor of it, but we say, but here are a couple things we might change. But
Sure.
generally we agree with it, but here are some things that we didn't necessarily agree with.
But I would advise, just a vote is not enough, right? I just feel that we do spend a lot of time bringing advice, plus or minus to us is valuable. And since we are advisory to the council, they should hear our advice and then go from there. They make whatever decisions, but we did our duty.
Okay. Let's move on from that topic if everybody's comfortable with that. And what other goals are out there?
Review monitoring reports, if that's, or is that, unless that's under, so one.
Yeah, it's right here. I put the topics, not the action.
So one aspect of it is for us to review the evaluation and monitoring methods. But the second one is then when staff applies those methods to data, actual data in the city, and say whether this intersection or this segment fails or this is a safe or unsafe, that we review those reports, like if there's an annual report using those evaluation and monitoring methods, we should, as the commission in charge of advising on the mobility element, look at those reports and make a recommendation, because these are big decisions on what do you do when a segment fails. And the city council is acting on these right now, and we haven't seen any of them there.
Can you give us some examples?
So for example, several months ago, I presented to the commission my prediction that a bunch of the segments are going to fail, even though they're showing up as all A's. Well, there were 8 segments that were found to fail, and staff said, okay, for this segment, I think you should do this road project. For this segment, I think we need to exempt it because we're never going to be able to make it work. And for this road project, you should shut down development in this zone, or maybe multiple zones, until we can fix it. These are like the biggest decisions that the city is making on mobility, and yet we as the Traffic and Mobility Commission saw none of it. It just went right to the city council. If that's what they desire, that's fine, but I think we should put on a work plan that we would propose that we would do an initial review of that, to take the deep dive into it that they don't have time for, and then they would, then that recommendation would be forwarded on, so.
But wouldn't that be something that should come to us anyway?
It depends if it's on the work plan. Going forward, if something's on the work plan, you'll see it, and if it's not on the work plan, you're not assured that you're gonna see it.
Right, that's why I
what
think
we're
it should
doing.
be on our work plan, to make sure we see it. So we've been talking about the work plan for months and months, and I kind of knew that this was coming, and then of course, because we've been, delaying things for months, it went right to the city council.
I think that it's good to put in a verb on that one. I'll just say that, be cautious on what the verb is, because I don't think the city council needs direction on what to do on that. I mean, that's a very high policy, you know, as far as, you know, what could happen, but I think at a minimum that you would review the data, I think, to make sure that the assessment, let's say in this case monitoring, we're gonna monitor the system and make sure that it was done properly. You know, the data behind the decision, the data-driven decisions, make sure that the data that's going to council has been reviewed in public.
So is this related, it is related, to the general plan mobility element? And is there something as far as a goal goes to providing advisory input on the general plan mobility element and its implementation? Is that?
Well, that would cover, like, if you saw my list of 15 things, 13 of them are covered by what you just said.
I did see your list.
So like 13 of the 15 ones in my list are what you just said.
Okay.
See, he summarized this very.
Could you change something
Well,
while I'm thinking about this?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
So it says, review staff recommendations, so, and advise city council based on best practices and public input. Could you add data to that? Yeah, you can fix that too. Because we are data based.
Okay. And again, these are the ideas. We can get into the wordsmithing of how, but I'm trying to capture as much as possible what you've discussed. So let's kind of clip through them real quick. And these aren't in any priority order. I would like to get a sense, and we can do some voting on these. But review staff recommendations on the multimodal transportation system and advise city council based on data, best practices, and public input. Review mobility around schools and associated safety. Review evaluation and monitoring of multimodal transportation system. Provide advisory input on the general plan mobility element and its implementation. Provide advisory input on mobility and transportation safety policies, protocols, and procedures. Not clarify, but basically I'm just using the term feedback loop, a clear feedback loop with city council on their actions. And really it's this next one, review the current communication of the commission to the city council, the subsequent action by city council, and report back to the commission. Delete that. What are we thinking about this?
I think the reviewing the monitoring reports, I don't think that's in there, but I think that's very important.
That should have been here, review, evaluation, and monitoring of multimodal, no, it's, where'd it go? Yeah, review, evaluation, and monitoring of multimodal transportation system, that.
Do you want to be more specific?
What?
I think that one was for
It's
the
kind of the same
methods,
one, yeah.
not the report. I mean,
So one thing I just want to comment on the annual growth monitoring or growth management plan monitoring reports.
yeah.
So once staff validates the data in that report, so that's for all aspects of growth management, not just circulation. Under the municipal code, they have to immediately report those results to the city council. So there may not be an opportunity to come to this commission before it's reported to the city council, the actual report. Not that staff couldn't present later to the commission after it's reported, maybe there could be a simultaneous distribution to the commission, so you receive it at the same time as the council. But under the code, staff has to, once they validate the data, submit it. So I just want to highlight that as a.
But you
Right.
seeing the data, what would that be? If we saw the data before, the data does not change, right? They have to present the same thing.
We had the
Well-
report, just so that everybody knows, that there was a report that was circulated to council. Then we went to council,
Right, there were two different things.
two different things. So, just so you know, I'm not saying do one thing or the other, but
Well,
the
yeah,
circulation of the
but-
report has to be done kind of instantaneously. So we need to circulate it.
But certainly then there must be some interim, I don't know. I mean, you've collected data already, I assume, for the next monitoring report because we're past the date when you would have collected it.
Right,
So that
right
data-
now, I'm evaluating it, though. Right now, I'm
Let's
putting it
think about-
together, and then once I get it done, it's going out. I mean, I'm really pushing to get that report out, and it's due
But what are you
December.
hoping to, because you're not gonna change the data, so what are you hoping that our input would be for the council on
We
this
would,
report?
we would make recommendations to the city council on, so staff as part of that report
Okay.
is saying, they might say everything passed, but we might look at it and say, well, wait a minute, but that number, when I look at your table, it should have failed. So that's one thing we could do. The other things my staff might say, and they will, I'm sure, because from my reading of the data, there's going to be a lot more failures in the next one, because they didn't analyze all of them in the first one. They might say, okay, these 6 segments are failing now, new failures. Here are our recommendations for what you as a city council should do to address those 6 failures. We as a commission can look at those and say, okay, we agree with those recommendations, or we say, well, we might not agree with those recommendations. We might say, well, you should do something else.
Could we come back though? Do we have the,
Here, this is what I would say is use, and in that case, I'd probably put 2 different things there with 2 different verbs, and then let the city council decide. Because remember, it's the city council that's gonna decide what our work plan is, we're not gonna tell them what we're doing. So in that case, you might say review the monitoring report and make sure the data is adequate, and then provide input as council requests. So I think that's the point, is if they don't request it, we don't want you providing them input that they didn't ask for. That's what the work plan's about. So you can review it, and then you can say, hey, we'll provide you input. If you'd like our input, we can help guide you on what to do to resolve it based on what you tell us. And I think that would be the caution that I would say is, don't just take it upon yourself.
I think if we bring, if we kind of open this communication more and we bring more value to the council and kind of get them used to requesting for our input, I think slowly we can also have that request from this side, not just us pushing. I know what you're saying, and we're doing as much as we can, but when we get the roadblocks, I think we can also work backwards. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I just,
And if that means for me, for you to keep going back for open comments and, then that's what it takes.
yeah, I mean, to be perfectly honest, if the commission is not allowed to do that, I will just go as an individual, and like I did these last 2 times, I just announced at the beginning, which I did. I'm a member of the Traffic Safety Commission, but I'm speaking individually. That there were a lot of things in those staff reports that I disagree with, and I think we should, as a commission, talk about them. And so the fact that they go directly to the city council without someone taking a deep dive into those staff reports, I'm concerned about that. That's why I'd like to review them if that's not possible.
Could we come back after we see it? I don't know if, are we allowed after we see the
So I
report?
think, so again, there's 2 different things that might satisfy the commission. So one is the annual monitoring report that goes straight to city council if the data is validated. So that, like I said, there really wouldn't be an opportunity to come here before it goes to council. There could be a simultaneous distribution, so you get the data at the same
Right.
time as council.
Right.
And maybe if there's a collective will to have an item come to the commission at, say, the next available meeting to discuss that report that's already been released, that's one item that I could see potentially. Then there's, so the July staff reports you're referencing, those were how do we deal with the deficiencies now that were noted in the annual monitoring report. So I think there's 2 different items that you could potentially consider as part of your work plan, depending on what you wanted to see. I just wanted to note that one limitation on the annual monitoring report.
Yeah. Understood. So, yeah, we could say, receive the report simultaneous with the city council, but then if staff always has a separate meeting with the city council, separate staff report on recommendations on how to deal with deficiencies, we could ask to be part of our work plan is that they would review it with us first and then go to the council later. And if the city council says, no, we want to see them right away, okay, I'll catch up.
No, so
Well,
what
it's, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. So when you bring it, so let's say you bring it simultaneous to the city council and us, and we think that something we have some recommendation for the city council, but they already voted on it or whatever's.
So, just to clarify, and Doug jump in, so the annual monitoring report, it's just electronically distributed to the council, there's no staff report associated with that. So the later staff reports that talk about the deficiencies, there would potentially be the opportunity for
Okay,
staff
so
to come
we can
here.
put our input
Mhm.
in there. Basically, that's all he's trying to do, is get our input somehow, just as an advisory to the council. If they want to take it, good. If not, that's the two, but.
Yeah, I think that the right verb though is that I'm like, they can't, I don't want to get to a point where we're saying, well, they can ignore it if they don't want it. The point of this is you're available. You know, make yourselves available to provide input as council wants it. But you don't want to, I don't think we're supposed to provide unsolicited advice. Does that make sense? So that's what I want to avoid, is have something to say.
Well, what's unsolicited?
Meaning it's not on the work plan.
If it's part of the work plan, it's not unsolicited. We are supposed to be getting input from the public on what's going on, you know, traffic on PAR is terrible, okay. Well, we make some advice and stuff, that's what we're supposed to do with the city council is,
Yeah.
hey, pass them
So let me
advice.
try to wave my magic wand on this
Okay.
and see if we can, now you can't see it, because we're gonna move into beginning to get your reactions to these 6 goal areas that you have so far. You've already identified that currently dealing with the communication from the commission to the city council is something that's important, it's something that's sort of unclear, and you've also, through this discussion, identified there are items that go directly to city council, and that's unclear. So you could, in addition to when you're doing the current communications with commission and city council, subsequent action and report back, including the review of items that go directly to the city council, and come up with some recommendation on what to do with those items that would be otherwise going directly to the city council. So you make dealing with this issue and the review of all of it a part of your work plan. That is one way to approach it, because this discussion can probably continue until my kids are going to bed. What's everybody's sense on that? Make resolving this, because it's clearly a big area.
I think we resolved it because you clarified that it's just the report that automatically gets distributed to the city council.
Okay.
We can get that, but then we would propose on our work plan to say we would review any staff report that includes dealing with any deficiencies that were on.
Yeah, so we could broadly address this in the work plan, that you're gonna review basically how you currently advise city council on all items, right? And how the city council's actions come back to you, and if there's a subset of that, there's a specific recommendation that you have that you wanna do something on, then you can make that recommendation.
So it would just be advise them on monitoring report deficiency.
Well, I think we capture in 6,
Okay.
figuring this thing out, knowing that the monitoring report deficiencies is a big concern for this commissioner.
That can just be one of the tasks under that goal.
Exactly, that could be one of the objectives. Okay, so, are there we're at 6, I don't wanna limit, we also have about 17 minutes left. What are these 6 getting at? Is there something that is glaringly obvious that is not here that absolutely needs to be here?
I would say transportation demand management.
Okay, what about it?
Or more broadly, the reviewing programs that provide alternatives to expanding vehicle capacity, or we could reword it some way better, but just sort of a general goal of how do we deal with the fact that our streets are only so wide and we need to get people out of their single occupancy vehicles, so do we do that through transit? Or so the most obvious one is the TDM plan or program. That some components of it have been implemented, but it could use some major work to make it a meaningful program.
I mean, TSM and TDM, if I could,
That could go under the same
TSM and
umbrella.
TDM are gonna be critical going forward on how we approach. So I think some verbs in there, but if you group those together, that would be a very good role for you to identify and review TSM and
Review
TDM
and-
programs.
Review.
Yeah, so I had review programs that provide alternatives to expanding vehicle capacity, or you could say review programs that reduce single occupancy vehicle trips, or any program that falls under that. That would include TSM.
I just know council said those two words, I mean, they're very
Yeah.
much, that's a focus for them, so it
TDM
kind of,
and
TDM and
But
TSM is.
TSM is an alternative to expanding vehicle capacity, though, to improve level of service without increasing vehicle capacity.
Right, that's TSM, and then TDM is trying to get people out of cars, you know, you.
Okay.
Or just say review TSM.
Yeah, and because the other part that you can, I think, catch anything that you don't have is under the implementation of the general plan mobility element.
Yeah.
Okay?
I like it.
So,
Get Mr. Smith to do all the wording on it.
now y'all get to come. Those of you that did values did this once before. You're gonna get a total of, I'm gonna make it really difficult for you. You're gonna get a total of 6 votes. All right? 6 votes. You can apportion them however you wish.
So we should
A
just
vote
for
is
one we don't want?
is a gold star, but remember, this is points. So you have 6 points, right? You're gonna come up here and you're gonna put a little mark, just like this, next to something you want to vote for. You could do 1, you could take all 6. Right? So this is of the things you've talked about. You get 6 votes to come up here and say, this is what matters to me, and then we'll tally up all of those, right? This is not prescriptive, right? This is getting a sense of the room and what your thoughts are around these and what matters. So, this is when you get to get some exercise in. What I did was I numbered them all, so they're numbered the same thing that's up here. Again, wordsmithing can happen later, but I think I've generally captured what you are, the areas at least of focus that you are interested in. Everybody clear on what we're gonna do? Awesome. Let's stretch. Come on up.
No, I gotta read. Make the decision.
Well, you can stand up here, you can sit there, you can do it wherever you would like.
You get 6 dings.
So I'm gonna put 5 there.
Okay.
Where's the one that includes safety?
Well, read it up there, because there's way more stuff on there.
School safety.
Maybe you want a number 5, not, hey, Steve? Better read 5 again. That's
5 is the broad policies and
That's the advisory, mobility,
procedures.
transportation, safety policy.
That includes everything, that's why I'm sorry, putting 5 votes on it, because that.
But you put it on
No,
front.
but you put it on 4.
You get 6.
5.
Mine is technicality.
It says advise on the general plan mobility.
Yeah, that's up there too. That's number 4, but provide advisory input on mobility, transportation, safety policies, protocols, and procedures is 5, which is more broad than the number 2 you put on for schools. So I didn't know if you wanted 5, not 2. I'm not sure if you want 4 or 5, so that's up to you.
Okay, so I'm
You still want 5 there, you want
You're not
your,
supposed to convince him, he's supposed to make his
you want your 1
own.
there,
I
and
need
get
help.
rid of your 1 there.
I thought that was the safety focus.
Yeah, no, that's school safety, this is the broad
5
safety.
one, okay.
I knew what you wanted, I was just trying to.
Because 4 includes every single one of the other ones.
Staring him in the right direction.
No, I knew what he wanted, he just checked the wrong box though.
Now I got all these colors. Looks good. Okay, 1 and 5, so that's 6. Come on, grab a pen, throw stuff at it.
So how many in the end are they gonna be chosen?
Depends on how it works out.
That is a
I
question.
wasn't here last week.
If we all put 6 on number 1, then only 1 gets chosen.
There's something to be said about 1 goal work plans.
Yeah, you know what to do. decisions where they have to take action to make it a deficient plan.
I mean, it's just advisory though. So, I mean.
Mona had to help me a couple weeks ago with my motion.
Has everybody gotten their votes in?
Almost.
I think your focus is on school, you grab another safety word.
Okay.
Yeah, I
You wanted more
want
broad.
a general safety and then all the police and include everything, so I think that's not helpful because it's going to be too broad. I know we keep limiting ourselves, like there's no magic number. So this is what should be on the list. Okay, four. That's
Fine, no, if it's eight, it's fine, if it's two, it's fine, just depends on what it is.
It can be multi-year.
Totally.
The city's going through a 2-year budget process.
Well, I think it's just that this week, so this week is just so we're,
Five.
yeah, I know we're already September, but at least it's not calendar year.
Yeah.
That would really be good.
That's good.
Because it'll be.
Yeah, I was coming westbound on the PAR today, and traffic was where it back to low.
You're just, this is your imagination.
And before you were putting number, I kept asking the question.
So it should have
Same
6:36.
thing with, Sierra Horseback.
We have 36 up there, we have.
Find out.
Just for the past, the watch, forget it. You measure it, the watch, can be sort of backed up into what Robert's ranch is there.
Yeah,
Just empiric observation of what's happening, you know, you need to take into account.
Brassy times two, brassy times three, brassy times four. It's not just us, it's cut through. We're now on cut 3%, we're doing for this now, everybody's coming, we're actually
You know.
past 3%.
I never, lately, if I go to church, that takes me south of Palomar's, but that's the farthest I go south.
Palmer Airport Road.
In my everyday driving around Carlton.
You don't know what's going on in my neck of the woods.
You live in the south?
Yeah, we're in the southeast.
That's good. But then you represent that side. No, I'm always amazed how big it is, but we don't get many people. And I do feel that demographics is the, like younger, it's in that side, like working poor more. But they don't come to, well, they're busy reading checks and taking kids to soccer practices and all that stuff. Hopefully if we can engage more demographic, I think it'll be good.
I think the issues are more intense, problems are more intense in the coast and in the village and barrio areas. That's where most people from there probably.
You think so? I mean, you drive more on the side.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where some, like Carlton are.
Well, it's worse on the coast, and a lot of that has to do with I-5, because everybody, you get through Carlsbad now, you get close to the boulevard and stuff like that, just to get around, because I-5 is 6 months, 20 in the morning. I think you'll be out pretty much all day.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. I don't know, like, I don't get it Saturday and Sunday, like you try to go south, it's crazy, try to go north, and so are these people going, Saturday and Sunday.
Well, with the construction going on,
Well, that I'm talking about,
it automatically stops at Palomar Airport Road, or Cannon, yeah, and from there it's chocolate.
All the time?
Yeah. It used to be, don't go out past 3:30, but now.
no, right, I mean, you go like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and these people don't have work.
Saturday morning, I did an early photo shoot, so I got down to San Diego early. It was fine, you know, it was just so nice, beautiful. come back up around the north on 10:30. 10:30 Hamlet. You know, from the crunch, the 5805 interchange on. It's just Hamlet. Northbound on Saturday morning, wasn't it?
No, I'm telling you, I don't know where they come to.
Okay, we have everybody?
Well, do you have 36?
No. But I think something is not exactly sorting out, but you guys can sort that out for me. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I think this is 1. I think that's 10. No? No? Nope. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We spent 7. Oh, no, there it is. No, that's 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This one right here. 1, 2, 3. All right. The good news is the math doesn't matter because you guys get to all decide at the end. All right. We are going to get a sense now of whether these are now the rank order priorities, and we'll start with what we think are kind of the highest ones. Advise on general plan mobility element and its implementation. Advise on mobility and transportation policies. And then we move into a list of 6s. Review staff recommendations and provide advice to City Council. Review the feedback loop. And school mobility, that's up there. And then down the line a bit more is the evaluation of monitoring and review of the TSM and TDM. So let's ask this question of the group. Is your number one goal, and again we'll wordsmith this, to provide advisory input on the general plan mobility element and its implementation?
No.
Okay?
What did you say, no?
He said no.
I heard that.
Like I said, is that our number one deal? I don't think it is. It is for Steve, because he put 5 votes on there, which is why you got to a 9.
Of course.
That's why we do this second step. The second one that's up there is number 5. So provide advisory input on mobility and transportation safety policies, protocols, and procedures. Is that your top goal for this fiscal year?
I think so.
I see where Commissioner Hunter is going from. Number 5 seems to be a more overall arcing, the mobility plan. I think that's a given anyhow because you have to follow that, so I like number 5 better.
Okay.
What's the difference between 4 and 5? Could I ask?
The difference really is that we were trying to get to a lot of the evaluation and reports and some of that stuff, and that got caught between the general plan mobility element as more of a catch-all, whereas the second, there are specific policies regarding mobility and transportation safety that this group has brought up. One thing I would, because they're both pretty high, is consider collapsing those two into one goal and have the general plan mobility element and its implementation under the advisory input on mobility and transportation safety policy protocols and procedures. You could have that be
include the general mobility plan.
You could have that be your broader goal, and you could throw TDM and TSM under that. You could throw the general plan mobility element. There are things that could fit as objectives underneath that broader goal. Yes, sir.
Is number 1 what we normally do?
Yes.
That's
That was
why
written
that
way, yeah.
that's why that goal was developed.
Okay, so that should be first, because that would seem to me to be obvious to the city council, our primary responsibility.
Oh, we already do that, so they know we do that.
Well,
We can put it on there anyway.
Yeah, we can put it
Yeah,
on, I
it
don't
doesn't
have
need
to
to be
discuss first.
Yeah.
well,
It's a gold watch, so I.
but if we,
I put it
okay, well,
further.
let's,
Are you
Just
trying to
the-
rank them?
yes, are we supposed to, are we ranking them?
I thought we were just
We're-
getting down to 6
No.
or less.
Or less.
Hopefully less.
Oh, okay.
So what we're trying to get is your sense. We don't need to rank order these, right? We don't need to rank order them for purposes of in the document saying this is our highest priority, this is our second, this is our third.
Okay.
What we're trying to get is cutting out the things that don't really matter as much to this entire board after we've gone through the brainstorming session.
So if you put general mobility plan, TDM, TSM under 5, you've taken 3 to 1, right? And kind of kept the meaning the same?
Mm-hmm.
See, that's what innovation officers do. We just change the words and then you got an efficiency.
And then get your paycheck on Friday.
So I'm hearing 4, 5, and 7 consolidate.
Everybody good? I mean, we can specifically call them out.
Right, with objectives.
To include general mobility plan, TDM, and TSM.
The reason I put 5 votes on that one is because the general plan mobility element includes 7, has these 7 goals on it, and then it has 44 implementation policies. So by putting that, I include everything else that's on the list and everything else that's in the mobility element, but I don't think that's realistic. So I don't know that I don't know that we're getting anywhere. We need to select the specific things based on what we specifically want to do, and all of these goals are that one particularly is broad.
Right, and so that's why you put objectives underneath them.
But we could narrow down to just 2 goals. One is the first one, or 3. The first one, implementing the mobility element, however you want to write it, and then the communications plan, which the city council asked us to put on the work plan. With those 3 goals.
Is the school included somewhere?
Is what?
The school.
It would be under the mobility element one, because safe routes to schools is in like 3 or 4 of the mobility element implementing policies, safe routes to schools mentioned. But
let me ask you this, just from a staff point of view, I'll just give you some input. That's just, are you going to track us? Because that's like a huge document, it's a visionary document. So are you going to say, are we reviewing, what are you reviewing, you know? Or are you tracking to say, what progress have you made on these specific objectives? You know, that's a little bit different than advising, you know, that's more like, well, you should do more of this or that, but if you're saying tracking it, you'd probably say, hey, we want a report from staff.
Well, I think all those things are part of what the discussion then happens at the next, as we get more further into objectives. Remember that this document is one that is also outward facing and communicating to the public, so there may be certain things that may fit under a catch-all of 5, but that you really want to call out because it matters to the public. I see on there that review school mobility and safety associated with it. Is it a 6? That sounds like I've heard from this discussion, something that matters to the public and matters to some of the commissioners here. That is a good area to call out as an area of focus for a goal, if that's what this group wishes. Since we already, you know, we just eliminated 2 of them and put them all in the other one.
So can I ask a question on number 6?
Yep.
That's important to me.
Yep.
But nowhere have we put in a goal to address the public input as to being that's a goal.
What do you mean?
Well, part of our responsibilities is to provide an avenue for public comment. So we didn't really address that on the set goal. Or is that just
That's
kind of
implied, I mean,
understood?
we already, yeah, it's
Okay.
not, this is something that, the way I see the goals is something that we haven't, I mean, the first goal is what we're already doing, but this is what we want to do, that we're not doing.
Okay.
So we're already providing that.
Okay,
And
that's
we're
fine.
putting it here just to make sure that staff and the public knows what we deal
Okay.
with, so we don't go around. It's here in the Bible, then.
And we're
That's what
required by
I
law
heard.
to do that, so it can't be not on our work plan,
Okay.
I think. I put it as a number 1 on mine,
Yeah.
but I have kind of a question for staff. To me, I can divide them up into documents that already exist, documents that are being prepared and are not finalized yet, and then things that we are trying to initiate ourselves, maybe, which is a little bit tricky. But the documents that are already created, I think it's easy for us to review those because staff doesn't have to work on the documents. The ones that are not created yet, my hope is that if they're finished during a year, during the next year, our fiscal year, and whether or not it's on our work plan, if it's a mobility element related document, it seems like they should bring it to us and not say, well, it's not on your work plan, you forgot to put that on there, so we're gonna not take it to you. But then for the last one where we're initiating something, I don't even know if we can do that, but like the safe routes to schools, staff might say, well, you can't tell us to create a safe routes to school program, but we're creating that in the sustainable mobility element, and we're just gonna have to wait until that's done. We can ask them for updates, like you said, but,
Right.
so to me, this whole process really doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense, because there are things that already exist which we should review, and whether if we have 5 things we can put on our work plan, if there's 6 documents we want to review, we don't want staff to say, that 6th one you can't
No,
review.
you're thinking of it far too prescriptively.
Right. So
Far too prescriptively. And
think-
I appreciate that, but this is not a document that's supposed to be a hammer, right? This is supposed to collect all of your input on what you think should be the focus and the goals. And we're gonna try to write these goals collectively in such a way that it provides the intention of what needs to happen there. And I think you're getting to a lot of that with the goals that are here. Now, if there are certain areas that we're concerned about, and we can have this discussion in the next session, that there's, stuff that's out there that you're just not going to see, you always can, provide recommendation to the city council or to staff and have that back and forth about that particular area and what needs to be dealt with. But I think here what we're trying to do is capture enough of what the bulk, let's call it 90%, of what you anticipate for this fiscal year you're gonna care about and want. I don't see that, that remaining 10%, that there's gonna be, oh, nope, wasn't right here in the work plan, so no way, no how. And we can address that in an updated work plan as well, with the following fiscal year. If there's something really glaring that like city council hasn't given support for and that the commission didn't include in its work plan, if there's a dispute on whether or not it should be included, you always have the subsequent work
I
plan.
think this is a start, like, you're trying to make everything perfect, and I understand because you're so knowledgeable of everything, but we need to be thankful that we're getting even this much the first year and try to see what it is that we actually do want or think that it's necessary for us to be involved and all that stuff, then to just try to get it 100%, because it's not going to happen, not the first year. We need a little bit of practice. You're going from 0 to 100 in 1 year. It took us how many months to get to this point?
Right,
So-
but I don't view that as necessarily acceptable that it took us this long.
I know.
So what I'm getting at, and to me, staff has made it clear, and maybe we're under, I don't want to drag up old animosities, I want to have a ceasefire with staff, and we're under a new regime, allegedly, but we've been told if it's not in your work plan, don't count on it being there.
Right.
So for me, if there's a list of documents that we know are being prepared that are part of the mobility element, one of our work plan items would be, as they're finished, review them, and not say, okay, well, you forgot that one and that one in your work plan.
So isn't that covered by any of the bullets?
But I think our task that we write should say, when any of these documents are completed, and have a list of them, then we should review them, and there should be a catch-all.
And those can all be objectives.
Right, then we can
underneath
talk
goals.
about it when
Right.
that comes.
And I think the next meeting, there will need to be a discussion of staff resources and in terms of timing. So I think we can have that discussion at the next meeting, because I do think, to David's earlier point, some of these may be multi-year and as documents become available, as you mentioned as well. So I think this is broad enough, I believe, to capture everything that you're mentioning on that more granular level. But our objective is to plan for the next meeting for that more detailed discussion on the items so that we can try to drill down to a realistic list.
And I'm just trying to make my own personal vantage point clear that we don't want to miss these things just because we forgot to put it on our work plan.
Would it be
Understood.
fair to say that if we have it right, we will be presenting to you which documents you will be able to see? Instead of you telling us, if you give us enough high level, we want to see these documents that have to do with the mobility element before the city council takes action on them. Something like that, or after they become, do that as opposed to say, we want to see the TDM ordinance, we want to see this. Let us kind of come back,
I
and I
think,
think.
so as part of the next
Yeah.
meeting, like your list you created, very specific, you know, that's what I think the objectives are gonna be more.
Yeah, so the objectives of the specificity, the
Exactly.
Yeah,
granularity.
and then we'll come back and say, well, we can get to these, but we can, you know, next year, that document may not be ready.
Your concern is very clear.
Yeah.
And I want all the other commissioners to know that this thing that I created is only mine, but I tried to capture everybody's stuff. But you should
And we
add
appreciate-
in everything that you did. I'm not trying, I don't want to monopolize the
Yes, submit it to
conversation.
Doug by the 20th.
By the
Right,
20th.
just email it to Doug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to our list of goals. The others that were up there, I am hearing that this whole communication with council, et cetera, items that go, et cetera, that is something that is important to this group?
Yes.
Is that important to the entire group? Something that you want to make a goal?
And the city council wants us to make it.
Yeah.
Well, yes, this is your development session. Okay, so I'm going to highlight that one. And that gives us 3 so far. 3 is a nice number, but it doesn't have to be the final number.
Then we just put other duties as assigned.
All right, so now we have here your ongoing work of reviewing staff recommendations and advising the city council. And you have review, evaluation, and monitoring of multimodal transportation system, including associated items that go directly to council. We kind of covered the directly to council under the last one now. What is the pleasure of the commission for dealing with these two?
Which two? 1 and 3.
1 and 3. 5 goals is good. Do you want to keep them both?
It's already, do we need to have 1 since we're already doing it?
Yes.
I like 1 because it's telling the public what the bulk of your work is. Now, I think that's
I mean, it'll be
important.
easy to achieve.
Yeah.
And again, remember, we're kind of, we're a little bit of a new commission, so it's not what we have been doing.
Right.
It needs to include what we have been doing to say, hey, what was the new commission? If somebody reads this, 6 months from now, it's like, who are these guys?
So,
Planning commission, sorry.
are you
We're gonna
recommending
know it.
putting number 2 in as part of number
It's
5 as a way to reduce the number of goals?
I don't think you need to. I mean, 3 or 5 is a decent number of goals. So if you guys like 1, my sense on 2 is I heard a lot of you say something about this, and I think that speaks to the public. And so the last is the evaluation and monitoring stuff, which that got 5, that got the second lowest. I have no opinion on what you may want to do with 3.
Does that fall under 5?
It could,
It's the E&M, right? That was the.
it could.
I feel like it.
It's just a question of whether that is important enough to be called out. It could be an objective under 5.
Opinions?
Well, objected under 1 as well, I would think.
Okay? Yeah?
Is there another layer under the objective then, like a task, or is the objective?
It's really going to depend upon how it comes out. Generally, for something like this, the objective is probably going to be where we end. But if we need specific tasks, we can do tasks or tactics underneath those.
I think it needs to be called out somewhere. You could put it into 1 or 5, but there's no monitoring anywhere else kind of in there. And that's something we haven't really been a part of previously, and I think it's a big issue. So, if you
Monitoring what?
what's going on around the city, it's kind of like, hey, we're gonna put that stop sign up, and then this last we heard, we're gonna change the speed limit on this road, and all that. Here's the striping, and then it all goes away. We never hear about it again, what happened to it again.
Yeah, it's kind of like a lesson learned. It would be helpful, I don't know if this, we can put in here, but it helps us if, when we implement or when we vote on something, coming back as a feedback, yes, the speed limit was a good choice, or the stop sign was a good choice. So then we learn, we have lessons learned for next time there's another stop sign coming in front of us.
Okay.
This traffic plan.
I have doubts about that.
I'm sorry.
I have doubts about the viability of monitoring something over months and months.
Well, they're doing that, staff is doing that.
There's two different things. There's a monitoring program that we monitor traffic a specific way. We go out and we're gonna do it. Now, what you said is a little different, that says, provide a feedback on projects that we've done of the efficacy of them. You know, are what we doing actually making a difference? But the
Yes.
monitoring program in of itself is just data, statistics.
Yeah, I mean,
So what are you saying?
exactly what you summarized that I was saying, that's what I said. But I don't know if that's possible, but I think it would help us make better decisions and more educated decisions, knowing what worked and what didn't work. Like we had the speed bumps on Cassia, was it Cassia?
The roundabouts, or the
Roundabouts.
lanes.
A lot of places.
We had a
Yeah.
lot of things on Cassia.
That, then they just disappeared, right?
Oh,
So-
like Cassia, yeah.
Yeah, so why did they go away? Because whatever, the traffic didn't work, or the roundabout was too small, or whatever the reason is. So that way, we kind of know, well, you know, were they too close, or, you know, just some kind of feedback that, especially when something like that happens. We put a speed bump and then a few months later it's taken away, but we don't know about it, and the reason of why.
But the monitoring program also, as to what's going on in the city and the flow, and which actually goes to a lot of what we were talking about before is, hey, let's, you know, we're looking at intersections, which ones are dangerous, or which ones are this. And
That's reviewing data, and I guess that's what I was trying to say.
That's right, that's what I'm saying, the
Just
first part
review
too.
the data, but we don't even have the data, so the other one is go out and proactively go out and collect data that you're not collecting.
Well, but-
And see it before and after.
Right, but when the speed bumps were taken away, there was a reason, right? That the city moved them.
You mean the traffic circles on
Cassia?
Cassia?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, those were roundabouts, mini roundabouts.
Yeah, so
Really many.
that's a perfect example of what it would have been a good feedback. Okay, we'll put this traffic center at this intersection, you voted yes,
Mhm.
and now because of whatever the reason was, we had to remove it. So we know when instance like that doesn't come. But, and monitoring, I mean, our monitoring can it be a report monthly, like the police report?
Well, they're already doing monitoring, they already have reports on it.
Right,
Not
so.
on speed bumps, so.
No, no,
there's-
I'm talking about the monitoring that you're talking about.
So when we're already collecting
Well,
it,
when the
we're
efficacy
monitoring
is
it,
up,
you would be
Right.
reviewing, so I'm trying to get your verbs right.
Yeah.
Right, so
Review the
there-
monitoring data that we already do. The other one is to go out, your verb is to go out and collect data after you do these projects to see if they're beneficent.
So-
That's an ask.
That
That's-
is-
Right, but like I said, we don't have to go to that extreme. We can just stick with the few incidents
Mhm.
that our vote to put in a stop sign or a roundabout or whatever it was, it doesn't work and needs to be removed or replaced or whatever that is. So
Mhm.
that doesn't happen every time, but when it happens, we'd like to get the feedback.
Yeah.
And then on the monitoring, I'm thinking, if you have the reports, wouldn't that be, and this is just a suggestion, of like a monthly, kind of like the police report? We get a monitor report on the intersections, or just an update on
You'll
what.
get an annual report. We only do it once a year. You would get an annual
Okay.
report, which would be that paper. The other one, though, I think is communication. When you say, why did it get taken out?
Mhm.
That's a communication, that's that loop. We gotta tell you what was decided at the city council and why, and bring that decision back here, so
That could be.
that's in the
right.
communication part of it.
So
Yeah.
these are things that could be talked about in the objective
Yeah.
phase. So I would definitely encourage, to the extent we don't have what Commissioner Linke already provided, you've seen his list that he distributed. So if there's things that this has sparked in your mind for specific objectives, I would send
Exactly,
those
it's
over.
sparked right now,
Mhm.
so that's why we're bringing it up.
Yeah, and so, let me suggest this, does everybody like what is underlined here? We'll start with that question. Do we have consensus on what's underlined, that it can go into wordsmithing now? Show of hands. Okay, and then number 3, let me suggest that we look at that as a standalone and as a sub and bring that back as an alternative way of dealing with that particular issue. Does that make sense? Or to everybody? Okay. Want to make sure we have consensus on what we have here, and then I'll get into the next steps.
The planning commission released their work plan, and I think there were probably 10 or 12 bullet points and a bunch of tasks underneath, a couple of them. So I'm not necessarily interested in limiting us to, but like has been pointed out, all of my goals that I have here could be under just one of those. So
Yep.
we're all making tasks here. So.
Yep. In no way are we limiting this. This is just for organizing and clarity of it, because then once you get to the objectives underneath that, then you can be a little bit more descriptive. When you have, 10 goals, people don't read through them all, and it becomes difficult to manage. But it's up to you guys. It really is up to you guys as the commission. All right. So, where did my next step slide go? Next steps. First and foremost, let me make sure my computer's working. Give yourselves a hand. You guys got through sessions 1 and 2. Good job. Thank you. Got all the way through the goals. So, work plan session 1, we identified the values. We've now used those values to develop a mission statement. And we've identified goals and provided input for the development of the FY 19-20 work plan. And in work plan session 3, we will come back to you with a document that we can then go through of goals and objectives based upon this discussion underneath those. You can add to those, and voila, work plan will be done. Very simple, very easy, no problem. Does that make sense to everybody?
And,
yes, sir.
And are we going to get feedback on staff? Like, we are going to, I've already submitted my list. Others are going to submit anything they want to have. I'd like to have feedback from staff on what they think is important and realistic. But then, could we get something more than 3 days before the meeting so that we can have some time to review, like, are we this draft work plan? Are we going to see it for the first time in the PowerPoint at the meeting? Are we going to see it the first time 3 days before the meeting in the agenda packet? Or
what we're going to do is we need to digest all this. I need to circle up with staff and get a sense of what is on here, what capacity is, what it is, and we need to work through some of those specifics. And then we can determine how will be the best way. Are we going to need another meeting after the next meeting? When are we going to council? We kind of gave you some of that information already. So let us digest that, and we will communicate back to you. But please, by the 20th, get in all of your additional written comments and understand that you would like as much advance warning as possible and would like as much feedback as possible on what is submitted. Sound good?
I have a question of Doug. I had asked you earlier about if there is a transportation division org chart available with names and titles with all the number of people that have changed in the last 6 months. It would really provide us a good idea who's heading what, because I don't know anymore.
And I think we've had quite a few turnovers and changes. I don't know that we have an accurate one right now, but that's one of the city manager's focuses, is to have accurate org charts. So
I don't know if this would be part of this, but it's a question for me.
I can promise to report it back once it gets finalized. So I think right now, to give you what it is right now is a moving target, but since it's a work in progress, once we get something that's like ready to present, we can present. Does that sound fair?
Yeah.
Okay, so are we done with this item, so we can move to the next item to decide when the next meeting is gonna be?
thank you all very much for your time.
Can I ask Dave just of one thing before you leave? Did you like it, the format here or at the council? Would you rather have it at the council chambers or here?
It is really your pleasure. For me, for working on this sort of stuff, I think it's a little easier to be in this location because of the roundtable feel, but I leave that to the pleasure of the commission.
Okay, that's what we need input from.
Yes, so that takes us to item number,
October 7th.
is it 7? So, it is important to finish this. And I personally feel this is more productive and a little bit more casual than the city hall. So let's just go by a vote. Who wants to have the next meeting here? 3. And I'm guessing who wants to have the next meeting at the city hall? And who wants not to come to the meeting?
I'll be at the meeting.
So we're,
I don't care either way, so.
You can't help him.
Can't abstain.
Can't abstain.
No abstentions.
No.
You have 7 for a purpose.
Reason.
You have no reason.
Yeah, do we get eats here every time we come?
Yes.
Yes. David and I will make sure that you have food. There it was.
4 or 5 o'clock.
Okay, so let's just choose the location first and
Yeah.
then.
I think we did.
Right.
And it is hard to get food
No,
there.
so I'll put my vote in here if we get
Okay,
food,
so
so,
we're
you know.
coming here.
I can be bribed easily.
And now, is it 4 or 5 o'clock a preference? Is it something specific? I personally don't care.
The October 7th, we still have to decide 4 or 5?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the question on the
The
table right
sooner we
now.
come in, the sooner we leave. I guess that's the one benefit.
That doesn't mean it, anything. If we come in at 4, we still may be here till 8 o'clock, you know. If we come in at 5, we may be here till 8 o'clock, so.
4 o'clock is fine.
I can do 4 on the 7th.
Okay, 4?
Okay.
Everybody can, okay.
And then it has to be notified to the public, right?
Right.
Yes, they will do that. So October 7th.
I think the fact that it's going to a new location, it'll be a special, I don't know if the
It's
term is
4
a special
p.m.
meeting, but it's
Special meeting.
4 o'clock, it will be a special meeting. And then November
And are we going to,
What about the November 4th, or do we decide?
we're gonna do that next.
That's the next.
Are we going to have a regular meeting where we get a police report and all that other stuff?
So we
At
can.
the next one?
We can. Today it didn't happen because
Christie's out on.
Christie's out. So
Okay,
that
so we
had
can't
nothing
even
to do
if
with
we're
this.
here. Even if we're here, because we have to be here.
This is
on
a meeting.
November.
This is,
This is a meeting.
there's public out there,
Okay.
just a different venue,
Okay.
so
I
the,
want to be sure that I want to be sure we're covering all this stuff that we should be covering.
Right.
well, November 4th is here, and then, yeah, the question being, what's on the agenda, that's still staff, and.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't want stuff to be not put on the agenda just because we're here, if there's things that we need to be doing.
It isn't for being here, and it's not about starting at 4 o'clock, so that
Okay.
will have no bearing on what's on the
Or
agenda.
food.
And then
Food will be
November
here,
is
we
gonna
can't
be
have
at
food
4
there.
o'clock too?
I'm being funny.
There you go.
November 4th is gonna be at 4 o'clock also? Because I think
It's
I
to your-
saw somewhere.
We can decide.
It can be 4 or 5.
Can we
I think it's,
decide-
right now, it's intended to be 4.
Yeah.
But, I
Can
think we talked about
decide
it.
Next one?
We could, but why don't you just pick one now, and then you can change it if you want. Does anybody have a problem with 4?
I'll
That
be
they can't make
busy.
it?
November meetings.
Okay, are you gonna be here?
Nope.
Okay, so 2 are gone? Gonna be
Being
here?
here doesn't matter.
Two
Okay.
of you won't be
It's on
here?
vacation,
Right.
right?
Can we move it to the 11th and have it at?
That's the holiday.
Yeah, it's a,
We have to be.
Let's just get this done, in the next couple of months we can be
Well,
done.
could you,
Finish the work plan.
Especially that we have 2 gone.
we can try. But then if we get it done, then you'd be voting on it on the 4th, but we'll see.
Yeah, okay, so for now, I'll
Is
make
that
a
a 4?
motion to adjourn.
What do we decide?
Did you vote on 4 or 5?
We said 4, so we're gonna have 2 commissioners absent. So for now, we're gonna keep the November 4th at 4, but we can change the time in October at the meeting if we feel like. 4.
And we could, maybe with 2 people gone, Amanda was talking about this. We've got the momentum going. If on October 7th, maybe we can meet a week later or 2 weeks later and have 2 meetings in October.
Oh, so then they don't miss the second one?
I'll miss it either way.
You're gone,
I'll leave on the 17th, we'll be back in a month.
So the 14th?
Well, 3.5 weeks,
Well, October 7th and then the 14th, we can have one maybe, but I don't want
Yeah.
to jam it, but that was kind of the intent, is like maybe we have a special
Right.
meeting and just get this thing done.
And I think that's fine, I mean, I don't know how the other ones, but we do want to get it done, so we can move forward.
So 14th is possible? Is that,
How about 2 weeks from today? Or is that, or does that not give you, no, that doesn't give us, you
Yeah.
guys enough time to
Yeah.
submit your comments?
Yeah, and they need enough time to
Yeah.
put everything together.
yeah, because then we'd just, I think the second one, the next one is 4 weeks, and then we can do a quick one, because we're going to synthesize, finalize, and approve.
And then have one in a week, but then have our one on November 4th, just so they'll be gone.
Yep.
Okay, that sounds good to me.
So I'll try to get one on the 14th, the 7th and the 14th. We'll try and do them here. We'll do them at 4 o'clock, bang it out.
Okay, so we're adjourning the meeting at 7:30?
Is there any other things on your agenda? Like
That was
Anything
it.
else?
The commissioner's comments.
City
and-
Commissioners' comments,
Yeah,
traffic
any-
safety, city engineers' comments.
Anybody has comments?
My comment is I hope we can finish by the
We will.
14th, so that we can
We will.
All right.
Are we taking these books home, or is Elaine here to?
I don't think we're allowed to take the,
Well, you're allowed, it's just easy. I think it's easier if we take them and then we fill them up the next month. So I'll take them for you tonight, but
thank you.
thank you very much. That was a lot of hard work, good work.